Commissioner Conant,
Present.
Commissioner Ziegenmeier, Commissioner Baumgarten,
Here.
Commissioner Wooten,
Here.
Commissioner Munger,
Here.
Commissioner Cochran, Commissioner Jawanda, Commissioner Baines, Commissioner Espandola, Commissioner Elphick.
Join me in the pledge of allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Second.
We can move and second it that the agenda be approved as presented. In discussion, those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
No. We don't have a set of minutes for
Oh.
the July
Excuse me,
meeting.
D- through the chair, can you use your microphone? Your microphone's off.
Okay, now we go. Minutes of July 8.
Move to approve, Conant.
Second, Munger.
Regular moved and seconded that the minutes of the July 8th meeting be approved as presented. Discussion? Those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Number 3 is the consent agenda. Need a motion for this?
Motion to approve. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve by Baumgarten.
Second, Conant.
Regular moved and seconded that the consent agenda be approved. Roll call, please, Paige.
Commissioner Conant,
Aye.
Commissioner Baumgarten,
Yes.
Commissioner Wooten,
Yes.
Commissioner Munger,
Yes.
Commissioner Cochran,
Yes,
Commissioner Jawanda.
Yes.
thank you. Okay. Item number 4. We now open for public comment on the Newcomb Ranch annexation to Gilsizer Drainage District. And as also says, this will be re-agendized for the November 11th meeting as well.
Let me give a little bit of explanation of why this is happening. The Revenue and Taxation Code absolutely requires LAFCos to have a signed property tax sharing agreement before we can set a matter for a hearing or issue what we call a certificate of filing, which means we can go ahead and approve or deny a project. So what's happened is the certificate or the property tax sharing agreement was never adopted yet. I talked to county administration a couple of weeks ago, and they were kind of doubtful whether it could go through the process before this meeting. I did talk to them a couple months ago also, but things move slow, and essentially the staff report is written. I just need to plug that part in, issue the certificate of filing, and bring this before the commission. So it's nothing the district's done, but the county and the Gilsizer board need to pass some sort of tax sharing agreement. So that's all it's waiting for.
Okay, so this is to be re-agendized for November
Next meeting, the next available
11th
meeting. We have a problem that our next meeting came up to be November 17th. That's Veterans Day. And I've been hearing a lot about that. I wrote in the agenda that this is Veterans Day, and we may wish to set a different date for the LAFCo meeting rather than the second. I guess this is the second Thursday. I'm sorry. We set it for November 11th. That is Veterans Day.
Oh.
So we need to set it for a different day if we're going to have a November meeting. What my druthers would be is if we could get the tax sharing agreement and set a hearing date based on when I have some content for you to discuss. So that, I mean, that's really it, but I'd like to set some sort of meeting. Normally, our policies say, well, it shall be the week after. It would be November 18th, I think. I don't have a calendar in front of me. And I didn't know, I went to the city's website and I didn't see if the city was open or not on Veterans Day. Saw a lot of other holidays, but it would appear to me it would be closed. But I don't know what the custom is in Sutter County. Okay, that's what, I had a hunch. So, would you be available the 18th to have a meeting December 18th? I mean, November 18th, I'm sorry.
I don't see a problem with November 18th.
Yeah, it's a matter of whether or not the meeting room is available. That's true.
I think the issue wouldn't be whether the room's available. We can make the room available. It's the technology for those that would want to be remote, because staff isn't here to support it on that day. I can open the building, but I can't can't be the Wizard of Oz on the 18th. Excuse you, on the 11th, yes.
I think just move it to the 18th is fine.
Yeah.
So we will change the November meeting from 11 to 18, is that correct?
Can you check to make sure
If we can do it in an hour, because I have a 3 o'clock too.
it's available? Okay.
Well, we'd be doing it in the record if we did it any longer than an hour. So, now, I put November 18th. We'll check with city admin to see if the room is available at that time at 2 o'clock.
He's telling you yes.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Okay, so we're tentatively on the 18th instead of on the 11th. Okay, fine.
That'll be continued to November 18th.
Okay, item number 5, review and discuss 2021 Sutter Grand Jury Report. John?
I drafted a letter for you as an invited response to the grand jury report. Last time we looked at the grand jury report, essentially the essence of the letter was that the LAFCo is, it's an agency that was invited to respond, not a mandatory response, that we're in the process of preparing a service review of fire and EMS. We looked over the grand jury report and we found what we'll do is update a lot of the technical data in there. And I wanted to explain to them what the contents of a service review is, the growth in population projections, disadvantaged communities, and we'll be looking at some of the issues. Volunteers is a big issue in Sutter County. And we couldn't let this one pass, but a lot of the property tax and tax issues that go on in counties are a result of voter initiatives, not boards of supervisors' actions. Board of Supervisors needs to implement it. They're required to implement it. But the voters did pass Prop 13, Prop 26, Prop 218. They did do that. So essentially, a lot of the funding is really, for these districts, is going to be voter-driven. It has to be. In California. So I want to make sure that for once we're not going to blame the county for something, because it's not the county's fault. So hopefully there'll be a campaign to educate the citizens on this sort of thing. So what we're hoping is the voters, both the voters and districts, will be able to use the service review in making decisions regarding future and sustainable funding for fire and EMS services. So that's the letter.
Can I make a comment on that? So I couldn't agree more, John. The whole problem is that all our fire departments in the rural communities are generated on special district funds. And those special district funds have been frozen, they're fixed, they're not. There's no inflationary factor built into them. They've been the same in many cases since the middle 90s. And you can't fund a fire department for what we did in the middle 90s. You can't fund anything for what you did in the middle 90s. And, you know, there's some people that believe that the county should pull the money out of the general fund to fund the fire departments. Well, if you did that, you'd break the general fund in a matter of a couple of years. You've got to find a more permanent, renewable source of revenue for those special districts, and it needs to have some kind of inflationary factor tied into it. And the county is looking at going to try to educate the public on this and to get this passed. And I guess that's about the extent of my comments.
Through the chair, I know when I was in the board, the Sutter Fire Department, I tried to get them to pass, go back and pass another tax. But they absolutely think it's the supervisor's job to do it, which is not the supervisor's job to go pass a tax. It is up to that district to go out and work and get that tax passed. I came back from an RCRC conference. I see that the county's looking at it now, is that you can charge insurance companies for accidents out on the different highways. And that was 5 years ago, and it's just now they're starting to talk about it, but they've lost 5 years of revenue on that.
That was much longer than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, districts have been doing that for years. A lot of them just choose not to do it.
Oh, when I brought it back, I remember, maybe it's been longer. It was over Napa, I can remember, and Marin County had they got everything written up. All they have to do is just mirror what Marin County did.
Exactly.
Through the chair.
No, another thing is, there was some issues with, is it Sutter Basin, the fire district down
That's Robbins.
Robbins district, and I think we've located a chief, an existing chief who happens to be from Knights Landing originally, who is willing to kind of help out on a limited basis. But he is a full-time chief. His name is Jeff Gilbert. You might know Jeff from Williams. So anyway, we've worked with Jeff over the years, and he's been pretty good to work with.
We have a comment from the public, question
Yeah.
from Heather Eshman. She wants to know who puts the initiative on the ballot, the voters?
The district will.
She just wants you to elaborate on that, I guess.
No, it's just in the code. The district needs to put the initiative, any funding, special tax initiative needs to be initiated by the district. And so that's what'll happen. And once it's placed on the ballot, I think it's 120 days before the actual election. And then during that time, there's for and against arguments and all this information. And then it's voted upon on the ballot. And there's some special times that these elections can be held. Normally, it's less expensive to have these elections when there's a general election, rather than just a standalone election, because that can get very expensive.
There's a follow-up question from Heather. She's asking, who is the district?
It's whichever fire district, Robbins, maybe Robbins Fire District. If it's the county service areas, because there's several of them in the county, it would be the Board of Supervisors doing that as the ex officio body of the special or the county service areas. So that's, or if it's the city, it would be the city council.
Through the chair. So Robbins is a special district. It's not county run or funded, and it's funded through that local district there, and it's not run by the county either. It's a standalone district on its own, And that's another set of problems that trying to figure out how to get things done and down there seems to be difficult.
Yeah, it's a standalone district. It's unlike County Service Area G, for example, or any of those CSAs. They're run differently. Their district board will have to put an initiative on the ballot. They are independent from the county.
Through the chair. Have a little bit of fire experience, maybe like 30 years, but
Just a little.
actually did my master's thesis on merging fire agencies in Sutter County, albeit it was probably about the same time that they passed the taxing ordinance back in the 90s. But my recollection, and Commissioner Munger, Commissioner Koenig can I think, let me know if this is still the case, but the only independent special districts are Meridian and the Robbins District. The rest of them are dependent special districts that come up. And funding is the big issue. So here are a couple questions and then a comment. Who's doing the municipal service review? Is that you, John, or you guys take that?
We are, and Beverly
Okay.
Burr is working with me on it.
So here's my concern from the city of Yuba City is that, in this area, we're all regionalized. There isn't any one fire department that can handle a major incident. We all rely on each other. And for instance, we have mutual aid, which is call when needed, and automatic aid, which means at the time the 911 call comes in, they're automatically dispatched. And what we're seeing, especially in Yuba City, is, our calls for service are I don't want to say skyrocketing, but they're significantly increasing. And that could potentially place a burden on Sutter County because we utilize them on those fringe areas or outlying areas for automatic aid, and certainly rely on them as well as Marysville and other agencies on bigger incidents. As the Sutter County Fire Department continues to struggle, and, I'm certainly encouraged by what the Board of Supervisors is doing so far, it does concern us as a city on the fact that if the county's system, which certainly needs to be funded by those people who receive those services, continues to be compromised, that's going to affect the city of Yuba City as well. And if we continue to get called out and the reciprocity is uneven, then at some point we have to have a conference with the county and say, hey, look, there are going to be times when you're used to relying on us, and to handle our own, we're not unable to share resources with you. So to me, this is a big issue as far as life safety goes. And again, I'm encouraged by leadership at the County Board of Supervisors that, they're going to seek out what they can do. But as it's been explained here, they're not the sole decision maker in this. And so this municipal service review, I think, sets the stage for going out to the public and asking and educating and asking them to help determine whatever level they want to fund that fire service at. It needs to happen. And that to me is this municipal service review is a big deal in this particular issue.
Through the chair, one more comment. Thank you, Mark. Those are very good comments. Also, I wanted to bring up another thing that I think a lot of people are overlooking. If the county was to encourage and the people were to vote in an increase in their special assessment district taxes, which I believe would implement a 218 requirement. I'm not absolutely positive that's the case on all cases, but I believe it would most, if not all. I believe that those people, if they really sat down and looked at it, would actually get some benefit out of it that would more than pay for the cost of the increased assessments. And by that, I mean, you can't keep having a fire department where it's run by one or two people calling out to a call or per truck and get the kind of service that you need for a call that really needs to be handled correctly. And if you don't have it handled correctly, pretty soon your insurance is going to go up because they're going to realize that you're not providing the service required to keep the losses down in those districts. And when that happens, I think that the insurance companies will raise their fees and people would be more than more than benefit by the increase in service. So that's something I think we all need to look at, and that's something that people need to be educated on, and I don't know if that's really a county educational thing, but the fire departments and the special districts really need to educate the public on this issue.
Through the chair, you're right, Matt. The last time we did it out in the 90s out in Sutter when they built the fire department, the fire department at that time, the chief, they went around and educated the community about the ISO rating. And at that time it was very low. And I bet you right now that's really low too, because we don't have enough people on, on shift and on staff. But if they educate them and show them how much they'd save actually in their insurance, it'd more than pay for it. So it's really education. And we need to educate our fire departments too, because they still think that the supervisors ought to be the one out there walking the street telling them to do it. And your fire departments, they're a special district, and that's their job. And then they should be out and educating the people in the community, or putting letters out, or, because they're very important in communities. Most of you need to get clear out, like Robbins or Sutter or in different areas. They really depend on that fire department.
Okay,
I have another
go ahead.
comment.
Well, it would be probably more appropriate for us to get the fire chief to respond to that. I can tell you what I've heard from him and from our city manager, who's sitting in the back. A lot of that has to do with some population increase. Yuba City's now at a population of 70,000. Essentially, the staffing at Yuba City Fire Department has, even though we have recently added staff, the stations are still the same. But the number of calls increases. Some of that is just access to health care. Some people use the fire department as their urgent care. I'd say 70% of the 911 calls that come into the city of Yuba City are pre-hospital emergency medical care. This isn't a community that experiences a lot of fire, but accidents, traffic volume, a lot of accidents have increased over time. Homeless. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's mutual aid, so that's actually the county, that's what they respond to, but it is Yuba City Fire that responds to those vegetation fires that we're experiencing back there, so that's our folks rolling out on that with the assistance of Sutter. So you get that, and we have had a rash of veg fires, but as the mayor points out, the majority of the calls that we do go on are medical assist.
Is there any way to educate the population on that? The other
Excuse me, Anita? We have some people online and they can't hear you. If you have any more comment, can you go to the microphone behind you, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So my question is, do we have any programs that educate the population on other options than using the fire department for their health care issues?
Yeah, it's a yes, but I would also say is you really don't want to discourage anyone from,
Yes.
doing their own medical triage, if you will. If they feel like they need assistance, we certainly don't want to discourage them from doing that. If all of a sudden we find, and I'll use the term loosely, frequent flyers, then there is a very much an educational program with those folks to point them in the direction of where they can better seek aid rather than burden the 911 system.
And one other comment I have, when I was in Wheatland, it was during a period when nobody wanted to increase taxes of any sort, which is pretty normal, I guess, any period of time. But it was very evident at that time. And we needed to increase revenue for our police department. And what we did is we talked with our police department and our police people, and they did go around and knock on doors. And what seemed impossible to happen, we got it passed because they got involved with it. So if the fire department, I think you're absolutely correct, gets involved in this in the special districts and so forth at the individual lower levels, that makes a huge difference. Thank you.
I have a couple more comments over here. First one is, according to the report, the area was serviced by CSAF. It's not really a question, she's just stating that. And then she says the ISO rating in CSA in the south was very bad. That's by Heather Espin.
Well, to sum this all up, the bottom line is that John Q. Public needs to be educated as to the need to fund the fire departments. Is that correct?
I think your summation is correct, but I would also say that I believe that this MSR should work with whatever strategies that the individual districts deem necessary to educate the public, whether, it's a strategic deal. I think both commissioners down the dais from me are saying the same thing is, they need to mobilize, they need to energize and get out and get the word. At the end of the day, the public's going to make a decision about what service level they want, but I think it's incumbent upon those folks that are providing that service to let them know what the consequences of their decisions are. And that's the only reason I raise the MSR is because it is yet another piece of educating the public about what's actually going on over there, rather than someone thinking, oh, these guys are just trying to, and gals are trying to feather their bed or whatever. Sure. It's a perceived neutral third party, really, and I think it's valuable. So I'm full support of this. I just, my bigger question was who's going to do it, and then, how's that going to be used? Because I do think that those folks out there need to know, as we as a city need to know what those Sutter County Fire Departments are going to be able to provide, because that absolutely plays into our long-term planning as a city as well.
Through the chair, to answer some of those questions that Paige just read, we don't have those answers right now, so maybe we should agendize this sometime and have the chief here to give us some ISO ratings. And if they're interested in it, it's up to the board. I'd be curious to find out what these ratings are myself.
I agree with you, and it would be interesting to know, if they have a plan already, or where they're at in the process of what they want to do, or if they have anything in the can to start going down the process of doing it. And Matt, I don't know, I don't know if they're doing anything or not. And I know you guys are very aware of it and doing what you can, but like you said, at the end of the day,
It's not the supervisor's job to go out and get this passed. Matter of fact, we're supposed to stay neutral. But I'm from a fire department. I've served 20 years in East Nicholas, and I see what's happening, and I'm cringed at what's going on in Robbins, and what do you do? Try to help educate the public, and hopefully.
I operate a business in Robbins. Believe me, I care.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's
There by a fire truck.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting to have a fire chief here to explain if they have any plans or what they're planning
Maybe
to
we
do.
should request that the fire chief for the county and the city give a quick report next meeting. Your
Ron,
chief
can you
could
arrange that?
talk about your call loads and what's happening in your jurisdiction, and the county could talk about the funding problems.
These two agencies, though they're different, city and the county, but they very much share resources back and forth daily. And so if one begins to struggle, it affects the other.
We'll try to get the county fire chief and city fire chief together at the next meeting, see what happens.
I have one more statement from the public or question. She's wondering, has the board read the report?
Yes.
Yes.
It might be advantageous when you have the fire chiefs here is that we invite Beverly here, who's actually preparing the service review, to explain to you some of the nuts and bolts of the service review and how it relates to what's going on, and some of the questions and some of the content that you may want to see in the MSR. That's content that's unique to Sutter County and the cities.
John, so that you would request those two to give a report, correct? That would come from you, or would it come from the chair, or come from?
Well, my thought is that we have our MSR consultant attend one of our meetings to have a discussion on fire like this, like we're having now, but having the fire chiefs here also, so that we can do that discussion before there's actually any ink put to paper. So it would probably be advantageous to have that done, and probably the November meeting would be appropriate.
Another comment or question from Heather Essman. She's asking, could they also invite the fire chiefs from Meridian and Robbins?
That was my comment as well. I think that
That'd be a good idea.
the independent special districts need to be represented as well.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move along to item number 6, policy amendment regarding indemnity agreement and expiration of projects. Council?
There we go. What we're asking you to do is adopt as policies 2 items. One is to adopt the voluntary indemnity agreement that we've talked to you about previously. And the second is to adopt a policy to set an expiration date on applications. We've run into this in a number of LAFCos where applications are submitted and just sit there. And then 4 years later, someone says, hey, we're ready to go to hearing on this. Well, 4 years have passed and a lot has changed. And LAFCo needs to be able to say, sorry, your application is out of date and you'll have to file a new one. It doesn't stop them from doing what they want. They just have to have a current application. But it's good to have a policy that says that after 2 years, it's out of date unless they ask for an extension. And as for the voluntary indemnity, again, this is voluntary. It means that they don't have to sign it. But oftentimes they will, and if they don't, if they ever get sued, they're very likely to sign it. So I think it's actually going to probably work in Sutter LAFCo's benefit to have both of these provisions, particularly the voluntary indemnity provision, so that if you do get sued, we have a mechanism in place to make sure that the applicant will help with the costs of the litigation. So I would recommend that you approve them, and hopefully we'll not have to use any of them.
You have in your packet the specific language that would be included in our policies and procedures. And this is the first reading of these, and we will continue this to the next meeting for approval.
Okay.
So you have the language before you.
Okay, so we will continue this till the November 18 meeting.
Right, if there's any public comment at this time, I don't know.
I don't see any over
I
here.
don't see any.
Through the chair, please. John, the situation on item number 5 with our discussion, does that change the context of the letter that you've prepared?
No, it doesn't.
So do we still need to authorize the chair to sign that letter?
Yes, you brought, I was going to bring this up after we were done here, but we need to authorize the chair to sign the letter
Right.
regarding the grand jury report. Yes.
Okay. I'll make that motion that we authorize the chair to sign a letter regarding fire services to the presiding judge of the Sutter County Grand Jury as an invited response.
Second?
Okay, it's regularly moved and seconded that I sign the letter to the response to the grand jury report. Discussion? Those in favor, please vote aye.
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 Opposed, no.
Okay, and through the chair, one more thing. We each got letters from the grand jury. Does this suffice our responsibility? Does this meet our responsibility to the letters that we received?
Yes, for LAFCo it does.
Yes, okay, got it, okay, cool. And then each one, like Live Oak, I would have a letter from there, and that would suffice my
Live Oak.
responsibility through Live Oak.
Likewise, the county and whoever else.
Like, okay, awesome. Thank you, John. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
To the chair, what's the timeline to complete the service review?
Pardon me?
What's the timeline to complete the service review?
We're looking at December. We're hoping for December, I should say.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, fine, we'll move down to item number 7, LAFCo white paper, special districts, current methods. John?
Periodically, LAFCo issues white papers. They did one on agriculture.
We kind of stopped in the middle of the last item.
Oh,
I mean,
oh,
did we get a motion to just move that item onto the second reading?
what Scott is asking for is a motion and a second to advance it to the second, to the next agenda for final approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, we move this to the November meeting discussion.
I'm
Those
sorry,
in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
who made that motion?
That does that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to the LAFCo white papers. You have a white paper in your packet regarding LAFCo. This is what I call the LAFCo 201 version. It's not the beginner's version of LAFCo here. But what LAFCo does, they provide information to its members. And this is a very well thought out paper. Remember, it's current as of July 1st, 2021. That doesn't mean it's going to be current next year, but it is an update. And what we're doing here is we're looking at ways special districts may be modified under the LAFCo law. And you can consolidate, you can dissolve, you can merge and establish a special district. And I promise I'm not going to read this report. It's there. What I frankly don't know all the contents of all of these, but when we have a reorganization, this is an easy referral guide, and it's all in the LAFCO law, covered in about 50 pages, summarized into about 2 or 3 here of the important points. So consolidation is when we're merging a couple fire districts. Let's just use fire districts. We like to merge them anyway. Maybe not, but nevertheless, consolidation is you merge a couple districts into one. You can merge. A city can. Cities can consent to merger. We can establish subsidiary districts. In some cases, subsidiary district works out. I've done one recently. There's not a lot of these, but in the case that I had was the people in the district, there was an independent district, they didn't want anything to do with the city. They didn't want to be in the city at all. The city council didn't want them in the city. They didn't want them in the city either. So it took me about 2 years, but we kind of brokered a deal that, well, let's do a subsidiary district. That way you can get the service you pay the city, and you're not on the city council, and they can't tell you what to do. They only manage the sewer service. So that worked out beautifully, and it's been finalized at this point. So it has been completed, but it is one of the tools in the toolbox. What we have is there's certain ways you can initiate consolidations or mergers or any of these things. The one caveat I would say is, well, why doesn't LAFCo do it? Well, LAFCo has such a low threshold of protest, or is it high? I don't know. It's very low. 10% of the registered voters or people owning land, people having 10% of the assessed value can protest.
Force it to an election.
They can force it to an election. I mean, so if it's a district or a city doing it, it's 33%. So, I'm sorry, 25%. So that is one of the things that you must remember. There's several points made here that we do when we do a staff report for anything like establishing an effective date. When does this annexation take place? We had one last month, and we went through all the conditions, and we filed what we call a certificate of completion and we recorded a certificate of completion for the Newcomb Ranch, and now that's part of the city. For example. There's an elaborate post-LAFCo process called conducting authority proceedings, and that's really very difficult to get in today. I'd be here for 3 hours talking about conducting authority proceedings. You don't want to do that. But you do have this before you. Dissolution is another topic that we deal with. One of the key factors with dissolution is who's going to do the service after. So LAFCo needs to appoint a successor agency. So if you dissolved one of the CSAs for fire, for example, well, who would do that? And LAFCo we would assign someone to do it. Maybe another CSA if we consolidated isn't there CSA B, C, and D? If we consolidated them into CSA, I don't know, whatever. So anyway, you have to do a successor agency. And all of these have the same thing. There's the effect of doing this, the effective date. A date certain is most relevant. A lot of times it's not when we record the certificate of completion. It could be July 1st, depending on what it is, or December 1st, whenever. So I think I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of all of these, but when we do have one, you'll see them in the staff report. And then we'll just be acting according to that, or we would evaluate it based on this part of the LAFCo law. But anyway, this was a fairly detailed working paper for LAFCO practitioners as well as commissioners. All of these applications have to have a plan for services, for example. Before, it was only one by a resolution. Now it's by everybody. So I have one problem is some applicant, Joe Blow from wherever, files an application with LAFCO. He has to do a service plan. Well, he has to really work with the agency because the agency is the one providing the service. And there's certain prescribed contents of resolutions and applications. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. But you got a copy of this for reference. And if you feel like you can't sleep one night, please please read.
Okay.
So I'm gonna anyway. That's it for that.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on down to item number 8, John, your report, please.
The Gil-Sizer Drainage District, we talked about that, and the tax sharing resolution needs to be approved. And the fire MSR, we talked about that. There's a vacancy now on the Sutter County Redevelopment Agency Oversight Board. There was some redevelopment agencies in this county, and when Governor Brown, I guess what was the word? Dissolved the redevelopment agencies. There were certain cities or counties that had several redevelopment agencies, and so they have redevelopment oversight boards. And so I did email the county auditor, and I guess I'm going to have to follow up, but the county auditor usually runs this, but LAFCo has the duty of, I was going to say got stuck with the duty of doing the advertisement. And of course, we don't have a special district alternate member either, which is another thing that we advertise for. So in the same manner we do the alternate or the special district member, we have to do the redevelopment oversight committee, even though we don't select the person. So anyway, there is if you know of a special district member that's willing to serve on the RDA oversight board, I would gladly give your name to Nathan Black, and you can take it from there. The LAFCo conference has been terminated or canceled. I guess canceled is the word. Terminated is the LAFCO term. It's been canceled. I suspected that this was going to happen. The conference next year will be at the same place. And maybe next year might be a better year to attend a conference. I tell you what, Orange County has had 3 years to prepare for this, and it ought to be a real good conference. It was going to be in Yosemite again. We did one in Yosemite a few years ago, but they pushed that back a year. So anyway, we're going to be getting a new LAFCo executive officer probably at the beginning of next year. There's a recruitment for one now, so we'll see what happens. I did take in an application request today, or I guess today, from, it's for what we call the Baines annexation. And so you'll be hearing about this in the future. I'll be sending the letters out to the county and to, it's a city annexation, and they're talking about a Gil-Sizer County Water District annexation. I'm not sure about that, and so I'm working with Ben Moody on that to just make a determination. Is this area subject to the Gil-Sizer County Drainage District or not? What's another curious thing is the way it's proposed is there's no proposal to detach this area from CSAG. So fire protection would be, again, a pass-through to the city, or not a pass-through. It would be the city would not be providing fire, but CSAG would, but it's a pass-through. So it's the same people that do that. So that's kind of what's going on in my world.
Any questions or comments to John? Okay, we'll move down to the next item. Any commissioner have anything they want to report? No?
To the chair. I had a question for John. I've had some people asking me about disincorporation in Live Oak. We've had a gentleman, Rick Dees, that is being kind of supported by JRTR and Lockvear Gag. He was appointed by them to take a vote to fill our vacant seat when our mayor, Luis Hernandez, left. And his main goal is disincorporating the city. And it seems as though Councilmember Gag and Councilmember Tiara are supporting that. And their actions as of late, they have turned down or voted no on 3 of our CFDs and another thing for our streets and our lighting and fire services. And so far, they have caused us to be short $834,000 in our general fund to make up for these tax assessments that we're not going to receive. I'm wondering, is this something that these gentlemen would be able to do by internally by doing the actions they're doing to disincorporate, or what actually has to happen to disincorporate a city?
I'm going to refer that one to Scott. We need a lawyering answer for this one because
Okay.
it's a little technical, and I think he's been through this actually.
Now, disincorporation is an extremely hard thing to do.
Okay.
But for it to happen, someone has to apply to LAFCo to disincorporate the city. That's the only way it happens. I mean, they could strip the city down to the bare thing, but still not disincorporate it.
Okay.
So if they truly are serious about disincorporation, they would have to put together a group, prepare an application, and submit it to LAFCo for consideration. And that process probably wouldn't be cheap. Someone has to pay for it. So this group that wants to disincorporate would have to come up with enough money to pay for both what would be a fairly extensive LAFCo process, a CEQA review. There probably would be adverse environmental impacts of disincorporating the city.
Yes.
And then, of course, as John pointed out on previous things, if you dissolve the city, who's going to take over their services? And, you know, the assumption, I think, this came up as an issue in a city that I was once the city attorney for. And the people just assumed, oh, well, if we disincorporate the city, the county will take over all those services and responsibilities and do it much better. No, the county has no obligation to take over those services. You know, and this would be the big issue before the LAFCO if we're faced with such an application. You know, it's hard to imagine LAFCO ever approving a disincorporation. But it's certainly not going to go anywhere unless they follow the steps that they have to start the process. Otherwise, they're just, I guess, sabotaging the city for whatever purpose.
I have no idea. How much would it cost? You said there would be a cost involved. Do you have an estimate of what that cost would be?
John would have to come up with the estimate, but I wouldn't be surprised if.
Couple $100,000 probably.
Okay. Well, that's exactly what they said. They said,
The state controller's report is, 50 to 100 right there, and the EIR,
yeah,
maybe 150.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and it goes on and on. The LAFCO fee's probably over 50 just to process it. The El Dorado County election, that's another cost. Election to dissolve it, because it isn't going to just.
Does LAFCO have to approve it before it goes to the election?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard for imagine that you facing all the things responsibilities you have to make sure these services continue somehow.
Well, they're assuming, he says Sutter, the city of Sutter is not a city. It's run by the county. And that Sutter County could just run Live Oak a lot cheaper than what the city is operating now. So that's their whole thing.
Well, they better get an agreement with the county to do that.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. All right. I
Yeah, there's
appreciate
all
that.
kinds of issues here. Financial is a big one with me.
Yeah.
How's all this going to be financed? What portion of the property tax really goes to the city versus the county? you'll find out that most of it goes to the schools.
Right,
So you're not going to get that.
yeah, so. Okay, thank you.
That'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
These guys are something else. I don't know what they're up to, so.
Much agreed.
Okay, item number 10, public comment. Anybody want to say anything?
I have a comment from Heather Essman. She is directing this to council to clarify. She says, public comment is at the end of the agenda. How can I comment on items that were already voted on? Shouldn't it be at the beginning of the agenda?
It's actually for the commission, not for council.
Well, I
He
think
says,
what
please
she's
ask
saying
council
is
to
that she
clarify.
didn't realize she could speak on any item on the agenda. I mean, it's,
Can
some
you-
people don't understand. They see that one item, they think that's the only place the public gets to talk. And that's not the case. Under the Brown Act, the members of the public may comment on any matter on the board's agenda.
Yes.
Through the chair, could we make our public comment period at the beginning of the agenda and instead of the end? And, because this has been brought up once before also. And also there should be at that point, we should actually maybe even read or say that a public can comment on any item. And then we just have, especially for these meetings that are kind of combination virtually and in person, we should ask if there's public comment on each item as it's brought up.
Yes, that's
Right.
precisely, that's required, actually, particularly when you have a virtual meeting.
So I was wondering if we couldn't make it, and I don't know, does it require a motion, I guess, to make a public comment period under item 1 or 2?
We can do that. We can move it up.
Yeah, we had it at the beginning of the agenda before, and it got moved to the end. We can move it back if that's,
I think it's better for the beginning,
that's the consensus.
especially for these, who knows how long agreement. I thought we were going to get past this one of these days, but it doesn't seem to be happening, so.
She has
Okay.
more comments here
Sure.
from Heather Essman again. She says there was no request for public comment during the items. Otherwise, I have to wait until they are done with all the items before I can speak.
We should have asked for public comment on each item.
Yeah, the public is allowed to comment on every item on the agenda.
Yes.
Well, yeah, when you have people sitting here, they'll do it, but when they're virtual, they feel much more.
It's problematic.
We really have to make that effort to put that out there to say, anybody who's on the telephone, do you have any comments on this item?
Okay, well.
Would you like me to ask her if she has any more comments for anything today?
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe.
Is that all you got, Paige?
Just a moment, let me.
Hold on.
She says, thank you. I spoke during the item.
That's it. Okay, then the next item is adjournment, and our next meeting is at 2 p.m. on November 18.